And on and on and on and on. Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app to your smartphone so you can stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. We can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today, and what a high honor it is to bring back a friend of the program, a guy who is always trying to understands that these are, in many cases, returning patrons that are coming to see melodic improvisation, whether it be in a folk setting or a jazz setting or blues setting or whatever it is. But he understands that they're there as patrons, and the idea is to get them off. And in doing so, with a lot of the bands that he's been in, whether it's Fogerty or Hornsby or, you know, in some cases even with Phil Lesch's band, he's always pushing the band to take a chance and give the audience a treat. And I think that truthfully is, it may sound simple, but it actually is something that is essential for live music. The sustainability of live music is for the rhythm sessions to drive consciousness of the band. It will then carry over to the audience and then back to the band, and that is ultimately the magic of music. John Molo, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, Jake, thank you so much. It's great to be back.
It's great to hear you, man. You know, I feel like we're probably just, you know, in the third or the fourth inning here, but I wanted to start you all with a name that voice, so name the voice, and then also pay particular attention to the content, and then we'll break it down.
Okay, I'm ready.
He started to get pretty good on guitar.
Meaning that, because I am not a Black Crow. You have to go back. You were telling me he did not have.
He didn't play guitar in Black Rose.
He just played.
He just sang.
He just sang.
Yeah. And he started, I guess, with CRB, Chris Robinson Brotherhood, as far as my knowledge. I know he had a band before that called New Earth Mud. I'm not sure if he was playing guitar in that or not, but started playing guitar in Chris Robinson Brotherhood, and we hang out every now and then, and he'll bring a guitar over or play one of mine, and we'll just jam around. And I'll go to a CRB show and I'll see him up there jamming, and I'll go, yeah, he's doing it.
So
I showed him that.
I know that voice. For sure.
So I mean, but as he's become in the sense of time feel, in the sense of improvisation. Like, how has he grown? He did not play an apparatus at all in the Black Crow. I mean, I have to apologize. I just don't know anything about it, but he did not play an apparatus in that band.
No. And, you know, I can't say that he's underrated as a vocalist. I think he's a great, one of my favorite rock vocalists.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I think a lot of people realize that. And wouldn't consider him to be underrated. But I think he's starting to pick up his game on guitar.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
who is that voice?
Man, that is one of my closest friends in the music biz, and not only a fellow musician, but a mentor and a therapist. That's Barry Sless.
You nailed it. One for nice shot to the gap already.
Man, he's something, and what a wonderful player and just a wonderful person. One of my closest friends, I would say. I saw young Katie Skeen the other day, and we were talking, and I said, I know you so well. I know Barry. And what Barry was saying about Chris, another interesting guy in that we're close. We don't hang out, but he's definitely a musical friend. He's got like this Wah Wah Watson thing going on.
But is that by his own account, or are you? Is that Molo riffing, or I mean, Wah Wah? That's a deep statement right there.
Yeah, he's got that kind of. Yeah, Chris is, he's got a feel thing, and I worked a lot. The continuing saga of who did I work with? Oh, right, Wah Wah back in the day.
No, you didn't. No way.
And bless his soul.
Rest in peace, man.
Call me up and go. I don't know if I can even say this. Can we say anything on this?
Yeah, no, there's no FCC reg. No, you can as a sailor cut it loose.
He'd call me up. My phone would ring about 8:30 at night. He'd go, Molo, you fucking? And I said, no, not right now. And he would say, well, why don't you come down to the studio, man? Have a glass of wine. Come on down to the studio. I got this track I want you to play on.
Oh.
So I'd go down there. I think I made $25 a tune. And go down with Wah Wah just because he was Wah Wah. And he knew he had me. And I grew up in D.C., so he would go, Molo, man, you're African hillbilly, aren't you? And I said, well, no, actually, I grew up in D.C., and I live out here now, and so I'm not really a hillbilly. I know Virginia, but
right.
That's a different thing. So he was just, you had to, there was no political correctness with Wah Wah. He would just go. And
when did you? I got to be honest though. I mean, this is important.
So anyway, yeah. Chris
No. Before Chris, I got. No, I want to ask. How did you meet Wah Wah originally though? These are the kinds of things that just, I mean, like the idea that he wouldn't just call on a referral. I know this because rest in peace, Wah Wah left this earth. But I was trying to. I mean, I was trying to track him down, and I called him, and he had one of the greatest responses I've ever heard because I was really trying to get him on the program, and he really didn't know where I was coming from. And I said, I got a lot of. I really would love to have you on the program. I think you could add a lot to the show, and we could have a vibrant interview. He goes, I got nothing to say.
Yeah, did he really?
He's just
That's
such
amazing.
but what I'm saying is,
he was really something. But Chris is out of that world. He's got kind of a Jamaican, Wah Wah Watson kind of thing going on, and he's really cool. Didn't play guitar in the Crows. I hope you hear this. He would dance and sing. He's got a kind of a maraca thing going on. He's shaking the maracas, and he's got kind of an Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull, Mick Jagger kind of frontman thing going that he came up with. And it's very charming. In your introduction, too, by the way, and Chris has this, and this is going to loop back. Yeah, my thing is connect with the audience, elevate, and they'll give it back to you. We played the other night with David Nelson, and somebody said, man, you guys were really good. And I said, the audience was great.
Yeah, that's right.
So it is that thing of connecting and all that. So there you go. And I will see Chris Robinson, I think, this weekend, along with Bruce Hornsby and Bobby Weir with his band, the Wolf Brothers, at the Beach Life Festival. So I'm looking forward to hearing both Chris and my old friend Bruce.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously we talked last time about that sort of, we didn't name drop, but you're going to be seeing the cat who likes to tinker with his sound when the band is grooving, and then all of a sudden he wants to come in on his groove. I thought that's what you were. I thought you were referring to Weir about that, but I could have been wrong.
Bobby Champagne Weir. Champagne bottled Weir.
Yeah, no, you're looking for. I mean, okay. So, but I want to ask this. What I was asking. By the way, that interview that you heard with Sless was conducted on Facebook Live on his porch in Fairfax. I know you spend quite a bit of time up there when you're up in the.
I've hung out there a bunch.
Yeah, he loves hanging with you up there, and
Oh, we love it, and when we do the band with Katie, California Kind with Katie and the Kind, we're up there listening to Merle Haggard and hanging on the porch.
Oh, I love it. I just love it.
The Southern California, we love it up there. By the way, we love Fairbanks.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just gorgeous. But I did want to ask you about. I mean, so I like the analogy to the wah-wah kind of Jamaican thing, but I'm curious about. I mean, I've talked to cats in the CRB, and in some cases, do you think that there's room within Greenleaf for Chris to be an improviser?
Oh yeah, there is, because it's such a different thing. Most guys are doing traditional lead guitar,
Right.
and Chris has got a different take. So it's a breath of fresh air in that way. Yeah, he can do it. But I mean, he's not going to get up there and play with Schofield, blowing fours back and forth, trading fours. But he's got a thing for sure, and it's about a lot of feel. So that's from my man Chris.
So that was you're 1 for 1, and this is going to be. I'm really excited to play this for you. And just for the the one hint I'll give you, he's a fellow kit drummer, trap drummer. So
okay.
That's the one thing I'll do, and just dig on it, and we'll come back.
I'd say later on, much later on, I was fascinated by the great reggae bands and artists out of Jamaica, obviously. And I did a session down in Houston, and they had a warehouse full of all the reggae records that had been recorded up to that point in time. And they were distributing them, and they went out of business. And they said, just take, I was asking about, what is this? And they said, well, just take what you want, because it's all going to go to, going to be given away. So I grabbed a huge armful and shipped it all home and just studied. And I wanted to take the challenge, because reggae music was the first thing that came along to me that was really, really different. It put the drummer in a totally different role, and I wanted to know how to do it.
Can you talk to, as a non-musician like myself in the audience, about how the drummer played differently? Was it more than just on the 1-3 instead of the 2-4?
Well, that's very, very elementary example of it, but the drummer really wasn't necessarily the basic timekeeper anymore. He was like the color player. He played over the top of what the guitar and maybe an organ. They were laying down a rhythm track, and the drummer played over the top of that with different little fills and accents, and the way the drums were tuned made a difference too. So those are the authentic styles of reggae. And of course, the English grabbed it and took it pop, and they did some interesting things.
All right, Molo, what do you got for us?
Man, that's a very interesting accent that guy has.
Yes.
I could make a couple of guesses, but just commenting on what he says
yes.
about that style of music, I think he's right on for the most part. I listen to Sirius Radio, The Joint. I get as much reggae as I can, too, so I really relate to what do you say about listening. And so you want to play a genre of music, a style of music, you got to see it, you got to listen to it. You probably need to rehearse it, and then you need to play it in front of some people. So blues, country, rock, jazz, instrumental music wasn't that hard for me to find. Playing reggae is a different thing. I don't think I'm going to be the first guy you call when it comes to reggae, but as far as listening to it and having it be a big influence, absolutely, from Monty Alexander on piano to Ernest Ranglin on guitar. Yeah. I mean, it runs the gamut from primordial to highbrow. I dig it. I've been to Jamaica probably about 4 or 5 times.
Do you want to offer a guess on who that was?
Is that Johnny Vodakovich? I was wondering.
You love to go to Johnny. No, that was This was. I guess they refer to him as King Tut. That was my interview with Ron Tut.
Ron Tut.
Ron. Now, and
wow,
here's the thing.
Man, so,
yeah, no, but
okay.
I should have prefaced. Sometimes I was thinking last night, should I play Molo my question that leads into the answer? And I said, I'll just let him. But the question that I had for Tut, because we're talking about a guy, I mean, really, I mean, it's pretty classic. In 1975, he was touring with Elvis and Jerry Garcia. I mean, that's about as interesting as you can get. He's done it. We know his decorated studio career. But my question for Molo is a style. What I asked Tut was there a style of music that humbled you? And that's what he went to when reggae, because when he first, I mean, really, when the first reggae records were coming across, they were starting. Obviously, you had many different iterations. It was called ska, and all these other terminology.
Yeah, right. I know what you mean.
But I mean, when those records first,
some of that stuff.
When he went into that warehouse, he's like Toots and the Maytals. He's seeing all this sort of like early '70s reggae, which is just being pressed, and it turned his head around. And so I ask you, was there a style of music that really humbled you and required you to shed?
Yes, I would say where my knowledge is right now, I agree with Ron. And also, as a young man, the athletic fusion stuff of Mahavishnu or Chick Corea, Return to, what do they call it now? Return to whatever. Return to forever. Whatever. Return to forever.
Yeah.
That stuff was really appealing to me. It was very athletic and very muscular. But as time went by, as the years passed slowly by, as George Jones would say, I really became more concerned with the feel of the music. And I thought ultimately the reggae, the Jamaican, ska, big beat, whatever it's called, the different names, I don't know all of it, but really spoke to me. Along with Ron Tutt, if you look at it this way, I was watching a fundraiser, and there's this guy up there, and I said, it kind of looks familiar. And it said Jerry Garcia, Elvis Presley, and Neil Diamond. And I went, well, that's the one and only Ron Tutt. And for anybody who wants to hear Ron at his best, in my opinion, I mean, there's a lot of Elvis Presley stuff, but with Jerry Garcia, there's a version of The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. And it is one of the slowest, poignant, grooving, whatever superlative you want to put on it. It is just incredible, and that's Ron. So, yeah, Ron, if we ever cross paths, you'll meet a huge fan. That's all I gotta say. And so, yeah, there's jazz, I mean, I love the Miles stuff. Plug Nickel, I think we talked about that with Tony. There's a lot of just incredible music out there. So I would say jazz and the fusion jazz just for the athleticism, but for the feel, I'd have to go to some reggae and maybe some Motown and a bunch of stuff. But yeah, reggae has turned my head for sure. Did
you have a return to whatever? I mean, I love Stanley. Lenny White also. I mean, the one thing I love about, Lenny had to be sober. He never did any drugs in his life, nor did Billy Cobham. And it's, you brought up Mahavishnu, and it is athletic, whatever it's like musical calisthenics. I mean, when you were marinating down in Miami, did you have a fusion, an aggressive muscular fusion band that you played with? And I mean, because those guys, well, it was just they were adding vocabulary. Did you play anything close to, I would love to hear Molo, sort of.
Oh yeah, man. So at the U of M, the teachers were good, but the students were better. And I remember Steve Morris from the Dixie Dregs saying to one of the teachers, well, I'm not really interested in playing, shows down on Miami Beach. And they said, well, what do you want to do? And this is how I recall it. He said, I want to get a record deal. And the professor said, well, how do you propose to do that? And he said, I'm going to write the material. I'm going to get a band. We're going to rehearse it. We're going to do demos. And I'm going to submit those demos to record companies. And then we'll go out and tour. And I thought, wow. So Steve, as I recall, this is a while ago, this is early 70s, put together a band called the University of Miami Rock Ensemble, which basically means, that was more of a listening thing. That was Rod Morgenstein on drums. And he was a fantastic drummer. He ended up in a band called Winger, as we all know from Beavis and Butthead.
Wow.
They would get terrible reviews from them. But I thought they were a pretty good playing band. But the Dixie Dregs were at the University of Miami, as well as Jaco Pastorius was around there. I think I've told you, Bruce Hornsby, my male role model for hard work.
Was like Matheny there? Gil Goldstein?
Yeah. Gil Goldstein, yeah.
Yeah,
Gil,
I mean, a dear
Gil-
friend of Jake. I love Gil. I mean, Gil is a mad genius.
Oh, he's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I heard him when he was like 18 or
Yeah.
19 playing in D.C., and I just thought, man, that guy's really good. So Gil Goldstein, yeah, Gil showed up down there. Hiram Bullock was there.
Oh, really? I didn't know that, dude. What
yeah,
a
yeah,
what a bastion of authenticity down. That's insane.
Yeah, man. I mean, so I would jam with Hiram. We would play with a bass player named Rich Freed, who passed away, unfortunately. And we would go to the Rathskeller and just sort of jam out. And I played with Steve Morse there one time, but Steve is more of he's not like, and he could be, I don't know for sure, but he wasn't like an improvisational guy, so to speak, just riffing and blowing. He was more orchestrated. But Hiram was there. He was great. And there were a number of players there that were very developed. Will Lee, the bass player.
Sure.
Joe Goldstein, Matheny. And as I recall, Will Lee's dad was maybe the dean of the School of Music just before I got there. So there were some pretty solid players. And the deal down there at Miami was the players were starting to get hip. Well, we'll go to New York after we leave Miami. We'll get it together down here and go up to New York or somewhere else. And it was great in that way. But, yeah, Gil Goldstein, Matheny, Steve Morse, Rod Morgenstein, Bruce Hornsby, Hiram Bullock, as I said, there are a lot of great.
Well, so I'm gonna, but I mean, Morgan. By the way, you said Miami University of Miami Rock Ensemble. Is that what you said the name of the band was?
I think it was called the University of Miami Rock Ensemble.
And then my Skype dropped there. You said it basically means what? What did you say that?
Oh, it basically meant that they had a place to rehearse
Right.
Steve's music. So Steve was basically putting what I think would become the Dixie Dregs together, but he was at the U of M, and I think four of the players, maybe late T. Lavitz on keys, or Frank Joseph maybe on keys, but Rod Morgenstein on drums, Steve, and I believe they had a violinist from Miami, Alan Sloan, and the bass player was just in the neighborhood.
But I mean, what I'm getting at is I want to hear about. You, I mean, you were taking it in, but what?
Oh yeah, I was a classmate, but the athletic, the blow-in improv stuff I was doing was more with Hiram, or there was a guy named Pete Ballin who played sax. It was a pretty thriving scene. So I was athletic enough. I was a high jumper and like probably an okay, baseball player.
Dude, you said you could have hustled it out. Yeah, I mean, you stunned me with the. I mean, you were very modest about maybe, basketball, you could have gone to like a D2 school or something if you hustled.
Yeah, I could have gone to probably a small school and play. But I had found my gift in drumming. Bruce Hornsby the same way. I mean, Bruce was more mid-level to D1. Bruce Hornsby could play some ball. And the first time I played with him, I thought I was going to kick his ass. He was so tough.
Jesus, my God.
Little did I know that skinny kid with the glasses on was like a tough defensive player.
Dude, your wingspan meant nothing at that point. Unbelievable.
No, man.
Unbelievable.
No, when he wanted to play some D, he played that good Tidewater defense. I was up around Northern Virginia where the defense was soft.
Yeah, you were. But he called you. What did Wawa call you? A country what? A country
African hillbilly.
Dude, that. God, I miss that cat, man. All right, so we're
and also just wrap your head around that. What does that mean?
No, I know what he means. It means you play like a cat, man. But you're you're from the hillbilly country. I know what he's talking.
Yeah, I guess it was a compliment because really I think he was saying you play like you want to play. You're poor. You're not playing it to make money. Obviously, if I'm making $25 a tune.
By the way, I need some of those demo copies if you have. I mean, what tunes? This is where the rubber meets the road. Where Molo and Watt.
Oh man, I mean, in talking to you and other people, sometimes they remind me. I've actually got a pretty good body of work out there. I just don't know where it is.
Well, listen. Listen. I got a lot of tread left. We got to start digging around and make sure this. I mean, I just know that a lot of cats. We just lost There's just so many amazing cats. There was a guy named Cash McCall. Nobody knows who that guy is. Phil Upchurch hit me to him.
I know who Phil Upchurch is.
Of course you do. Well, Phil. Cash was picking cotton in New Madrid, Missouri. His family they worked for plantation owners. This is going back, during Jim Crow era kind of stuff. And eventually he made his way to Chicago and became this unreal, just an incredible soul singer. I mean, right up there with all the other legends. And he was working in cadet and chess, and then he went on to work with Tennyson, Stevens, and Church. But I mean, he did, iconic player. Not enough. Luckily, I did an interview with him, so I'm able to document it. But we do need to get the Molo discography because it's all over the place, and it needs to be vetted. So it's a project for us down the road. But I'll
stay on that. And like I mentioned, sometimes somebody will ask me or remind me about what I've done. And you mentioned early on, people know those pop records with Bruce, and then we get into Harbor Lights and Hot House, and it gets a little bit more adventurous, Spirit Trail. But when somebody comes up to me and goes, "Man, I didn't know you played with Mike Watt," well, they're saying something about themselves in a way, like, "Man, those records meant a lot to me." So
right.
The Mike Watt stuff I kind of forgot about, and recently that's a cool record.
Well, and now, I mean, dude, are you kidding me? Wah Wah Watson and Molo, that's insane. $25. I mean,
yeah, well, it's a career. It's up and down, and you move to the side, and you connect with the audience, and you try to do your best, and don't get too fucked up emotionally or over your gear, and get up there and play music. Butch Trucks sat down next to me one night. And he looked at me and was like, "All right, Molo, show me what you got." And I was like, "Okay, Butch, get ready for your ass kicking, 'cause I'm going for it." And he loved it. He was just sitting about 10 feet away, and I just kept looking at him like, "I'm playing for you, bro. So take it in." Anytime you get a guy like that, like, say, Zig sits down behind you, the great drummer,
right.
We all know Zig.
Oh, yeah.
I like to call him Zig. I don't like his regular name.
Zig is great.
Zig is great, but when somebody like that sits down to watch you play, you bring it, man. And that's God rest Butch's soul. He was always nice.
Well, I by the way, before we get off the phone, I need your email so I can send you all these interviews so that when you're on the road or in the airport, you're gonna love, because I interviewed Butch and he was talking about slowing down Herbie Hancock's Sleeping Giant. I mean, we're going into that dude was playing all sorts of psychedelic dungeons and the rest again.
Yeah, man. And just it's since we swerved into that.
Yeah.
When I'm playing, it is an emotional thing sometimes. I mean, you got to give your soul or give your guts and everything. But when I'm playing that kind of feel, and the guitar player's soloing, we hit a certain spot, and I'm playing like, man, Butch will just enter my mind and my soul. And I can't think of a better tribute of his legacy than when I'm playing that. I'm thinking about, not always, but Butch creeps in, man, that feel that the Allman Brothers came up with instead of just playing, Jong, Jack, Jong. No, we're going, they subdivided it and came up with this beautiful thing, he and J-Mo. And anyway, beat goes on, man.
Well, this next one, so at this point, you're 1 for 2, and I'm going to you're going to get an intentional pass on this because you're not going to know who it is, but we're going to take a deep dive now, and I really want you to pay attention. This is honestly one of the most integral parts of my show. I didn't know it at the time, but the way this cat articulated it was spot on, and we're going to get down and deep. So check it out. Style, you said it was a sound of music, okay, that you were going after.
Yes.
And now I need you, again, the show does weave into theory, but as best you can, rhythmically, especially the timekeepers of that time and how they use the cymbals. Can you talk about rhythmically what was, because that's how you made it so hard to replicate. It was the rhythm.
Yes.
And I want you to talk about specifically, it was not bebop rhythm, like you said, it was done. It was not hard bop rhythm. It was this early 60s, again, they call it angry message music. To me, it's burning spiritual music that you would go home and you'd have to, if you were in touch with yourself, you'd have to think very clearly about what direction you were going. It made you think.
Yeah.
So please talk about
It
the
made
rhythm.
me think, yes. Okay. The rhythm actually was there. It developed in a way that wasn't restricted. I mean, when I'm trying to describe a rhythm that is not measured in even segments. You know, like, okay, you got a different time signature.
Right.
But I'm just, as an example, think of the 4/4 time signature, and the rhythm players in earlier times were tied to keeping the 4/4 time feeling. You know, it enabled people to dance to the music. You know, you can get your body involved in it. Now, in modern music, the rhythm developed the players of the rhythm developed a way into where the rhythm sort of floats. You know, it's not sequenced the way the early 4/4 time was expressed, and so you could not, especially the public, couldn't really feel the music in the way that they felt it before. They could move to it because they knew they could feel where the beat was, where the I kind of put it, the upbeat and the downbeats were, because it was expressed by the drummer and the bass player and other rhythm players. But in what they call free music, I don't like that term. I hate that term.
Right.
In this freestyle, all of the music, all of the expression of the music was loosened. Let me put it this way: it was loosened to the degree that you had to know how to measure the spaces in the music, because that was still there. I mean, that was still the multiplications of two in the feel of the music. You know, the 2, 4, 8, and 16 they're still present, but they're just not marked by the drummer. The drummer, you know, you have to be secure in your ability to feel the music, so that you don't depend on the drums and the bass to spell it out for you. And as a performer, we have to get used to being independent. You can't rely on the drummer to give us to secure the rhythm.
This is so amazing. I mean, all right. The reason I played that for you is because the thing that stood out for me was the idea of saying the improvisers or the other instrumentation on the bandstand. That was Julian Priester, by the way, the great trombone player.
Okay.
Okay, and nobody knows this, but the guy played with Howlin' Wolf and Sun Ra and Johnny Griffin back in Chicago growing up. And what
Julian Priester,
the guy who
wow, I had no idea.
No, these are the interviews. This is why you're going to go nuts over these interviews. But it's like what he's talking now. He's talking about free music, but what he was also, and we didn't get to this part in the clip, with Sun Ra, it was about he would point to people on the stage and they'd have to solo essentially, and they had to rely on their own inner time feel because the drummer and the bass player were allowed to play melodically. They were not strapped to just being that traditional timekeeping, you know, what their traditional roles would be. And I really wanted you to talk about, you know, in the bands that you're in, because I mean, a lot of people would say, "What are you talking about?" It's the drummer. Like you talked about, the drummer's job is to whether it's Chris or Fogerty or Hornsby, is to get them in a position where they can feel where the groove is and they can really get comfortable in it. What Julian was talking about essentially was at that time, playing music, it was up to the individual, even the soloist, to keep time and not rely on the drummer and the bass player. And I just wanted you to riff on that any way you wanted to. I mean, to me, that's when you talk about Philly Joe or you talk about Blakey or Elvin, it it was the fact that they were playing sheets of sound in some ways. Elvin specifically, they were not. They were not. I mean, nobody in those bands was relying on them to keep time. Everybody had their own internal time clock, and I just want you to riff on that.
Okay, man. We'll go. Playing with Phil. I didn't mention Phil. Phil, and I understand what Julian says. Free. What does that mean? Free music. We get into a thing. Barry and I have talked about this, and this goes to a little bit of the concept of the Dead, which sometimes exceeded their playing skills. What they wanted to achieve sometimes was very hard for them because their conception was big and advanced. So I'll say it this way. I'm playing Pulse. All beats are one. I'm not playing 4/4. You know what I mean? I'm not being.
Right.
I like the term draconian or procrustean. I'm not trying to fit it or make it be something. Occasionally, I'll swerve into that, and sometimes the players respond, and sometimes they don't. But when we're in an improv thing, a lot of times I'll go for just pulse and feel, but not being in 4/4 or laying it down in that traditional way. Having said that, occasionally during the improv sections, I may play boo, 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 and then just go to the floor tom. Boom, doom, gong, doom, gong, doom, dong, doom, sha, sha, dong, boom, boom, I'm basically doing Gene Krupa jungle drums, Ellington style, but I'm trying to bring it into a thing where it's not just so pulse-oriented, that it's putting the band into a different place. So Phil and I will take it out, and Phil is, if I slip into playing 7 instead of 4/4, or I'm playing 5/4 at odd times, he just floats over it. There's no problem. And at our best, Phil and I will take it on a total exploration away from the head, the tune, and then maybe even go into metric modulations, subdivide it into triplets, take it there, bring it back, and take that audience on that really good musical journey that they're yearning for, and then bring them back to, what's the word? You help me, Jake. Terra firma.
Yeah.
Bring it back to the land. We're out there in the seas and we're going for it. There's some turbulence, but we bring it back.
But you land the plane. You land the plane after the...
Yeah, man, we land it, and it's a warm, fuzzy feeling. So we do we play a folk tune, we play that, and then the middle section, well, let's get out and free and lose what we would call the progression, the form, and not always, but sometimes we can go there. So I guess that's my riffing on that. And the other thing is, though, and he touched on this, Julian did, about, you'd play it a certain way so the audience would dance. Well, I like playing really far out, psychedelic, and the audience can dance.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man, I want them to connect that primordial part of their thing and connect it to the brain and the heart. I want the whole package deal for the audience. I want them to feel all the parts of the music that hopefully we as musicians have been gifted to find somewhere. And the obligation of the nobility, man, get in there and stroll with the people, noblesse oblige, and really bring it. And because we're fortunate, man.
Well, I mean, but
Hearing music, what a gift.
What is it about? Not that, I mean, it wouldn't be unique if a lot of bands were doing what the Dead were doing, or what you do with Phil. I guess what I'm looking at is the idea of when you're, especially with younger cats. Again, you and Sears and Sless. I mean, it's kind of like this live concert wrecking crew in some ways. You guys have had so much experience. I just found this insane album called Silver Meter that Pete was on playing keyboards on with this British band. It's insane. But the question is, I mean, it's the most insane record I've ever heard in my life. But what are the intangibles? Like, you talk about the Dead. A lot of them were self-taught musicians. In some cases, obviously Phil and Jerry, they studied jazz. They were not jazz musicians. But, you talk to a bass player, it's like, I got to lock the groove, man. I got to lock it in. And the drummer's it's got to be right there. And you're talking about being in that spot, and then all of a sudden, when the song allows for it, taking it out, and all of a sudden you're doing all this other stuff, and you can hear. What are the intangibles for younger cats to loosen that groove? so that it can become a musical journey and not a formula trip.
With passing it on and being a bit of a mentor. If you look at like, the young people I work with, I've got a number of young people that I work with. Brian Jones is known as the guitarist with Vampire Weekend, but he's a bass player, went to USC, played with Gwen Stefani. He can do it if he wants to. We'll do a couple gigs. He's quick. He'll understand how to extend the jams, lose the progression, and bring it back. He introduced Barry and I and Pete to young Katie Skeen, who's a really good blues-based player. And we were hanging out listening to some music one night, and Barry and I basically said, look, Katie, when we're playing, give yourself permission to lose the form.
Right.
We played a recording of Phil and Friends from Charlotte, North Carolina, 2001, 4/20/2001. Jimmy Herring and Warren Haynes, Phil, me, and Rob Baracco take it way out for a long time. And we played young Katie this recording. And the next night, sure enough, she came out. And when it got to those sections, she just let it go. I think a lot of it is realizing that you can lose like the bass player said, I got to lay down the groove, or the drummer. I got to lay it down, man. Yeah, sure, you got to lay it down,
right.
But that doesn't mean it has to be pedestrian.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Is that's. I mean, before you met Phil, were there? I mean, obviously you had that experience at Laguna Seca with the cats telling Bruce to don't play the same set. But I mean, did you?
Yeah.
I mean, were there other experience even with Hiram Bullock, or were there other times where because you have to be. Basically, you just have to. It's your truth. Like every time I see Molo play, which by the way I did, I had this flash back from 2001 that I actually saw you with Phil and Warren in New York somewhere. I think at the Beacon. I mean, but before you ever connected with Phil, was there a time when you were when structure was merely an assumption, and you were able to lose that structure, but then bring it back? Did you have a chance to get comfortable in that groove? Because apparently it you make it look easy, but it's not. It can be a mess if it's not done well.
Yeah, it can. Yeah, Bruce Hornsby and I used to do a duet improv thing, and some of that is out there. I mean, it's on there's some vinyl of live performance with Bruce, where it's just improv duet. We just take off and play for 2 or 3 minutes, and that was my first experience of playing in front of a large audience and playing free, playing no structure at all. So I had gotten into it a little bit. And you got to remember too, I think we talked about this, Phil is beatnik era.
Absolutely.
They're pre-hippie.
What?
So,
wait, hold on. Wait, that's a ballsy statement. I don't know about that. No, what I'm saying, because listen, I've interviewed the Merry Pranksters, which were before Phil, and I mean, George Walker remembers Phil playing, avant-garde Ornette Coleman trumpet on the corner, but I didn't know he was lumped. The beat seemed to come before the. I thought Phil was right. I thought those guys were right in the hippie scene.
Phil was pre-hippie.
Yeah, I guess they were jug bandish kind of.
But he's the king of the hippies now. but
he is the king of the hippies.
Yeah, they were George Walker. Wow.
Dude, I mean, the axophone, man. I mean, dude, the dude is the fucking greatest dude of all time. Ken Babbs.
Well, we had to escort him off stage one night. He came up on stage and would not stop playing that kazoo thing.
Right, you had.
And I saw him later and said, "Hey, man, that was not cool, man. That was so unmusical."
He was just geeked up, man. He was geeked up.
It doesn't.
Come on, dude.
George Walker. Yeah, man. So he told me one of the greatest stories about the Dead.
Go ahead.
He goes like this. He goes, "Yeah, they came up to Oregon." And they said Jerry Garcia got out of his car and walked in with a guitar and an amp. And Billy Kreutzmann had to take 5 trips because he had drums. And they were doing their own gear and just traveling around. And I think he told me they made $200. I went, wow. And he said that was for the week, not for the gig. So I know George. He's one of the originals, right?
Absolutely. I mean, Hagen won't talk to me. Babs and I have done 8 interviews. Walker's still around. I mean, the original pranksters.
Yeah, I still see them when we go to Oregon. They come out.
It's fucking great. No, because those guys. Anyway, Phil absolutely is. But he's not a beatnik. I mean, the beats were Ginsberg, and I mean, I know that Phil was heavily influenced by Cassidy, but I just feel like, Phil was more of Phil was like a Mills College Subotnik kind of, electronic classical, cat. He was.
But also, if you read his book, he delivered the mail in San Francisco.
He was it was a great gig to put some money in your pocket while he was writing all those classical scores. But
I guess so, man.
I mean, but how does that differ? I guess it's interesting to me always as kind of just a non-professional musician. Was it like the Dead wanted to do stuff like what we've been talking about, but they struggled with it sometimes? Is that just because they didn't have? I mean, Julian, you could listen to these interviews, and he's. He's up there in age now, but he's still so well spoken, and he's talking about, and he's so lucid, and I just wonder about why it was a struggle. Was it just because they were really folkies or cats that didn't have that built? You said it best, man, with the harmonic scales, which Phil was obviously obsessed with. I mean, it wasn't about the technical. Ornette said to Bruce, I don't care about the technical side of it. I want to hear the sequencing. I want to play music. But
I want to play music. I don't want to hear them play a sequence over a chord.
Exactly. He didn't want to hear. He didn't want to hear pattern. Exactly.
Oh, this chord is here, so that means I can play this selection of notes, and then it'll be bebop. He was looking for something else.
So compare it to like Jimmy Giuffre when he were the Road to Damascus with Steve Swallow and Paul Bley, who could do it like. I mean, because Giuffre went free, man. He went real free for a minute. I don't know if you ever heard those albums, Drummerless with Swallow, and really, it's very beautiful music where the Dead were fitting in notes to certain chord progressions, and it didn't always. Sometimes they'd hit a wrong note, but they'd figure it out. I mean, was it more? Is that the struggle you're talking about? The idea that they could hit it sometimes, but not as consistently as maybe a jazzer, quote unquote, or a jazz band like that could do it?
Yeah, when you get into that domain, we did 2 gigs this last weekend with Dave Nelson, Pete Sears, and Mookie, and the first night was good, and the crowd was fine. But the second night, we really connected. We just hit it. So you're always in search of it. If you think like a basketball team, there are 5 guys out there. Sometimes it's just not working. Other times, the ball's going around, everybody's scoring, everybody's playing
release, rotation,
and I think
splash.
It's similar to music. When you get 5 guys up there, we're all trying. I never want the audience to think we're just mailing it in just because it's not as great as maybe it was another night. I've heard people say, yeah, that was okay. And I'm like, well, I guess it's like you said, it's like landing a plane. You try to land smoothly every time. I'm sure the pilots do, but it doesn't always happen.
Well, actually, I mean, here's the other part. I mean, and it just popped into my head because it's just so classic. One of my favorite rhythm sections is David Garibaldi and Rocco Prestia. And the thing is that what Garibaldi said to me that was an epiphany that, here is a guy, Dick Grove, big band, he was playing a schooled drummer, an academic drummer, but also figured out his own patterns and made himself unique. Rocco couldn't tell you an F to an A, didn't know anything about music, and yet they absolutely created the best rhythm section ever. And I just remember talking to Pete Sears at that Moe's Alley gig after the sound check, and he basically said, or in one of our interviews, he said, I don't even know where it comes from. He's just playing bass. And I'm like
something.
It's incredible because Mike, how does it work with Sears? I mean, you guys are obviously broken it down now where there's there's a telepathy going on, but can you because you are a schooled cat. I mean, not only bandstand experience, but you've done going back to the badass singing nuns all the way to University of Miami, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, my great high school teacher, Gary Elliott from the Navy Band.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm very fortunate. Quick thing on Garibaldi.
Go ahead.
Okay, man, this is a musical drummer joke, kind of a prank he played on me. So we're backstage somewhere, and I think he's playing with Mickey Hart, and I'm playing with Bruce Hornsby. and we're getting into some rhythm stuff, and he goes, "Hey, Molo, can you play like that 6/8 clave thing?" And I said, "You mean like Yeah, he goes, "Yeah, that, play that." And then, "Can you play like quarter notes on the hi-hat?" Chunk, 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 chunk. I said, yeah, I got that. And then he goes, "Now, can you play like 8-note or triplets on the kick drum?" Go, 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 go. And I went, "No, man." I said, "I can't do that. Can you?" And Dave Garibaldi says, "No, I can't do it. I just want to see if you could."
Typical Garibaldi, man. The guy, just
Garibaldi,
busting
drum
balls.
Humor. Oh, at the summit with Dave Garibaldi. Yeah, man. Those guys came up with a great style. So
I guess
think,
what I want to talk about.
Just mention academic. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's this. To me, it's the where Rocco had no base. Like, I mean, in some ways, just like a typical neophyte when it came to music, but he just was the most. It was like a Rock of Gibraltar, and those guys were just cooking grooves. And to me, when I listen to you and Sears, it's the same way, man. I don't care how the plane's going to land. It's always a great ride with you guys because, and yet you're coming for. I guess that's the point. Is that do you see with the? Because I know you do work with a lot of younger cats, and I mean, Ndugu Chancellor said that to me. Rest in peace, man. We were having coffee and doing a Facebook Live interview. He said, "Man, some of the biggest issue today. All these cats that come to USC, and good for them. They come on scholarships. It's an international jazz is international language, but they all play with themselves. They don't go out and play with the cats with the rubber bands on their horns and the guys in the streets or the guys that don't have the academic pedigree. Do you find?
Yeah.
Do you find that that it's a little cliquish more than? I mean, was there an inclusivity with you, especially with the going back to the days of the African hillbillies like in Virginia? Has it become more exclusive now, where people are like, I only want to play with these cats because they got a pedigree, as opposed to just sort of these slop jar street scholars that were pivotal to so many records and to so much music?
What happens, I think, and we touched on this before, all the young players listen individually, too. They don't listen collectively. So because we were in vinyl world, headphones were a special event. You'd plug in to, secretly listen. But the rest of the time, we were in speakers, and people would listen together. And I think that made a huge difference. Rich or poor, whatever, when you're listening and doing a communal listen, it's different than just strolling down the streets of New York with your headphones on. It's a different experience. And not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I do notice a bit of a difference with some of the younger players. And also, just take off the safety net, man. Go for it. Don't worry about it. Pete, you mentioned, Pete and I have developed this thing, and to a certain extent, along with Barry, too, the three of us, Barry and I will talk about it occasionally. Pete and I rarely talk about it. We just go out and try to do the best we can. I think he's one of the greatest, and he says that to me, too. And, I mean, my favorite drummer that Pete worked with was Mickey Waller, probably, on Jeff Beck's albums. I just love the way that guy plays. And he was a close friend of Pete's, and I don't know, maybe I'm just channeling Mickey. I don't know. I'm Mickey Waller, not Mickey Hart.
No, of course.
Those records, I love the way. He was a huge influence on me. And, God bless the Brits and UK. They brought the blues back to the United States between the Stones, Zeppelin, and Yardbirds, and all those great bands. So I don't know. There's just a connection there, but it's unspoken. We rarely even just chat on the phone. But when we see each other, we couldn't be closer. And I love him.
Yeah,
He's
no,
a great person.
I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, you guys obviously have this chemistry, but is there can you talk to him in musical lingo, or is it really more just about feel? I mean, does he? Because you and Barry might be able to talk about theory-based stuff, or going from this chord progression to Sears.
Yeah.
When I see it with Sears, it's just coming through him, and I'm not sure.
It is. But I mean, you can talk to him about it, sure. But he'll just like Barry the other day said, when we get to this thing on this one tune, just that we kind of go in from a Caribbean feel to like a foreigner.
Right, the feel. It's
I
the
know
feel.
That sounds funny, foreigner feel.
Foreigner.
Snake Pit is the tune. and we segue from like almost a reggae thing, and then we're in this boom, do, 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 do. Sort of got that Foreigner, Keith Olsen feel to it. So Barry might come over and say, hey, man, we get that section. Really just try to get it as big as we can get it. And I just go, okay, cool. You got it.
Right.
Pete and I, not so much. Like, if I do that, Pete just goes, okay, we're making it big here. That's cool. Very, very quick and just super talented.
Well, we're going for a pitching change, bringing in the left-hander to face Molo, and because he's a switch hitter, maybe stronger from the left side or the right side, do you say? Are you strong? Are you strong?
Am I stronger?
Yeah, I mean, what's your stronger side?
My little league swing for the fences swing is right-handed. My line drive serious side is left-handed.
Wow. So I mean, but Chili was working with you on which side?
He talked to me about learning how to switch hit at age 21. And one of his coaches came up and said, Chili, you got a real good chance at making this major league roster. I think if you develop from both sides of the plate, it'll be a slam dunk, something like that.
No, what I'm trying to say is that prior to Spezio and Davis, which side were you hitting from, left or right?
Right.
Got it. Okay,
right.
so
And actually,
yeah.
let me clarify that. Actually, the right side of the plate, and as soon as I would swing, my head would start to come up. I was swinging for the fences. Once I got to the left hand, my head stayed down on the ball. So I started just driving the ball more. And it's just, we could talk about it, but the other guy that was influential that's lesser known than Chili Davis or Scott Spezio is J.V. Collier, the great bassist with Bruce Hornsby.
Wow.
He was a pretty good high school player, and I think he got an audition to get a tryout for a single A team.
Dude, I cannot believe all you cats, man. It's unbelievable.
So he helped me with the left hand. And I started doing it, I think, when I was age 42. I learned to switch hit.
Well, I'm bringing in the left hand.
Hey,
go ahead.
Having said that, though, I didn't take acid till age 62.
Well, that's going to be in part 3. That is a mind-blowing absolute statement right there. I mean, I constitutionally, I always know with acid you have to be in the really good headspace. Was it with a?
Yeah, I was at Oregon Country Fair and cruising along, and somebody came up and said, "Hey, Molo, come back here and say hello to my friends." And I walked back there, and somebody said, "Oh, that's the guy with that." And I went over, and I thought, I have the next 2 days off, and I'm at Oregon Country Fair. So,
beautiful.
Boom, there you go.
The spirit.
There was the first time, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm bringing in the left-hander now to turn you around to the right side because you're obviously a more proficient, more of a consistent left-hand hitter. So I'm bringing the lefty in, and we'll play this clip. You see if you can get this guy because he's. The clue I'll give you is that he is from the same generation as the wily David Nelson and Garcia, and he grew up and he was in the milieu of those psychedelic bands. And what we've been riffing on before as it relates to free music in the folk aesthetic, I think he nails it. So I want you, and I think it's kind of what you're doing with Chris and with Nelson and with other cats too. So take a listen to this and we'll break it down.
Happened is what was brought into folk music and what makes San Francisco music unique, and then ultimately all the jam bands of today, is melding that folk tradition with an improvisational sense, right?
Right, exactly.
So that what you get is, in the end, you get a kind of folk music, country music, bluegrass music, melted with an improvisational sense of music. And then, when you're really there, when you can do what jazz musicians do, and that is suspend time. You get to that place, which I like to call the zone, where there's no more time, there's no more structure except as an assumption. It no longer needs to be stated. You're in the zone. I don't know if I'm making any sense at all.
Are you kidding me? This is what my show. Tell me about one of the early times in your career where you feel like you got into the zone, because that's not an easy place to be. You're talking about the jazz sense of improvising off a theme, not reading.
I am, only we're folk musicians doing the same thing.
It's badass. It's so badass. That's why it worked. Can you talk to the audience about a time early in your career where you can remember getting into that zone of improvisational euphoria?
Well, and that's exactly where we began to get with the rock band, I'd say in the middle of 1966. You know, I can't peg a specific date and time, but if you mix that together with legal at the time, just so no one is shocked by what I'm saying.
No.
You mix all that together with psychedelics and little folk music, an idea of what jazz is, right, and mix it with folk music, and you have, in essence, an improvisational zone in rock that probably the best exemplar of that preserved in contemporary culture is the Grateful Dead. Right?
You want to take a gander at who that is?
It sounds like so many people I've
I'll tell you, he's just such a beautiful, I mean, he is, you're going to know, I know you know who it is, you will know who it is when I tell you, but I mean, the guy is one of the most just articulate, brilliant, he actually he became a lawyer in his second life and still plays.
That was my first guess, Barry Melton.
You know what, dude, you know what, you just hit it out of the park. You swung for the fences and you got it. Inside the left field foul pole. Unbelievable. You nailed it. The fish.
Thank you. No, I was thinking that he would be on my short list, but I don't know Barry that well. I've only spoken to him a couple times, but man, he's got it. You know, he's one of those guys when you hear him on that SG, whatever he's playing, you can hear the psychedelic thing. A number of them have it, you know, and Barry Melton, man. Country Joe and the Fish. My first big, huge rock concert at Merriweather Post Pavilion, just outside of Columbia, Maryland, between D.C. and Baltimore. Iron Butterfly and Country Joe and the Fish. And I thought, Iron Butterfly, man, did they sound great.
Well, no, I mean, I can read between the lines there, but what I'm interested in you talking about is it's not about the Greenleaf Rustlers because you guys are putting your own vibe and accent on cover on just old great tunes. But Peter Album, from Big Brother, he told me, folk tradition is essentially taking these older songs and then putting your own twist on them. And I wonder whether California Kind might be a little bit more of a rock band. But what is from your point of view? How is the Gen Xers like myself or even the younger generations, continuing that folk aesthetic? Because what he taught, it's funny you brought up the whole Oregon Country Fair excursion, LSD excursion, because LSD was legal. You could go to the League for Internal Freedom. Dave Getz from Big Brother told me you could go there, similar to medicinal marijuana today, walk in, get a strip of acid, and you were good to go. So you mix psychedelics with a little bit of folk music, and all of a sudden you've got this improvisational zone. That was then.
Exactly.
That was then. What is it now? I'm not even talking about, it's not about drugs. I'm just saying, what's the newer generation in your mind with what you see? What is their accent on the evolution of folk music?
I think with some of them, it hits them, and some of them, it doesn't. I worked with a young guy for a number of years out of the D.C. area. Now, I worked with three. There's Brendan McCusker, who ended up working with Ryan Adams. There's the guy I told you about, Brian Jones, who's working with Vampire Weekend now. He's a great guitarist, great musician. They have found it, but the other young guy I worked with is a guy named Richard Wynn, and Richard just loves pop music. He's more in that world. That was his choice of what hit him. Now, the young girl I talked about earlier with California Kind, Katie, one of the reasons we wanted to work with her was she knew all the songs. She knows Babe, It Ain't No Lie by Elizabeth Cotton. She knows, Mississippi John Hurt. She knows what we would call the contemporary, the term the fake book.
Sure.
In the old days, you have all the standards in that book. Well, the new fake book. which is all the folk, all the Dead, all the Allman Brothers, the band, some of the Doors, Fogerty for sure, blues. The new fake book, I think, is what the older players and I occasionally see in the younger players. But they have to search it out. Like Marcus King has had a great teacher in Steve Watson, who is in South Carolina, taught at USC. But Steve was also just a great musician, a lot of TV dates, could read. You need maybe a mentor like that to steer you in the right direction. And so look at Marcus. I mean, you know, he plays with the Crows. He's got his own thing. He's more of an older soul than a younger body. I think Jackie Green's got a little bit of the same thing. Katie's got that, the curiosity for recordings and the tradition, so to speak, folkloric. Now, Barry Melton mentioned, if I knew that, I'd go there every time.
Wait, say that one word. That's very important.
Branford Marsalis, as I recall, somebody said, ask him, how do you get into the zone playing-wise? And he goes, if I knew that, I'd be there all the time. That's where, you know, like if you say a player, man, that guy's really in the zone now. Like you're talking about Yelich or one of those young, great players, right?
Right. God,
he's in the zone.
Insane, yeah.
So how do you get there? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it gets into you. Who knows? But when you're there, savor it and try to borrow from that experience and go back there. Go back to the zone. I know that's really kind of, it sounds very weird,
but I want to be clear about something.
We're all trying to get there where it's all comfortable, nobody's struggling, everything is just great, and that you're connecting or you're playing really well in the studio. You're in the zone, you know. So
and I think also, I mean, just
be able to get there.
Just to be clear, I mean, I think one reason Barry can't peg a specific time, and maybe it's always latent, right? I mean, there's no way if you're in the zone, you're not thinking, oh, I'm in the zone now. It's only after the fact, right? I mean, it's latent.
You just found it,
right? Did you
Virginia Beach?
Yeah.
At a place called the Cave. I think I was 25 years old. I found the zone.
What was it called? The Cave?
Yeah, I think it was called the
this
Cave.
Is so. I mean, this is.
And it was just what a kind of funky little joint. But Bruce Hornsby band, we would play there with his brother Bobby and Bobby's wife Ann and Steve Watson, the guitarist.
Is Bobby still with us? By the way, is Bobby still around?
Bobby is with us. Unfortunately, his son R.S. Hornsby passed away. I think at age 28, and we loved R.S. and one of the great guitarists that was coming up. He's on a couple of Bruce's records. Sounds like a combination of Kim Akmathini and Trey. He was just a gifted young guy. So Bobby's still kicking. R.S.'s spirit is still kicking, especially with me. And Bruce is doing great. I'll see Bruce tomorrow at the Beach Life Festival. So, well,
this is the thing. One thing about Chris, you know, there's, without getting too deep in the weeds, there's some transitions with his working band and the Chris Robinson Brotherhood currently, and people are having some conniption fits. And to me, one thing about Chris Robinson is he's kind of, here's the thing, Molo, like California Kind, it's cool. It's a band, okay? The Chris Robinson Brotherhood is a band. The issue I have today is there's no bands anymore. And so someone leaves Chris Robinson's band and people are freaking out. And I said, you know what? I don't know how the delivery went. I don't know how it all shook out. If it was, you know, that's a separate issue. What I know is that what I think, I look at Chris as a modern day Art Blakey and Miles Davis as a leader, only in the sense of he brings in accompanists and gets them ready to be leaders on their own so that they can form bands. For me, the live music experience, just going back to San Francisco, Country Joe and the Fish, Jefferson Airplane, Sly and the Family Stone, Santana, the Grateful Dead. You may not like all those bands, but they were bands. And so the point is that,
exactly.
You know, so maybe there's some fallout and an accompanist in the CRB leaves the band, but they're actually ready to be leaders of bands. That to me is genius.
Yeah. And I think I know what you're talking about, just personnel changes.
Exactly.
You know, it happens every once in a while. And, you know, for me, with Chris, and Chris knows this, if he hears it, he'll be fine with it. Chris and I get along great. You know, we don't hang off stage. I mean, we do. We listen to music, and we do the regular rock thing, man. We listen to music. We're brothers. We hang out. But, you know, when Chris feels vocally he'd like to play with another drummer, I'm okay with that. You go back to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Stan Lynch is a killer drummer.
Right.
So is Steve Ferrone.
Exactly.
You know, it's just the way Tom felt when he sang with Steve, that maybe he wanted to go with Steve. It doesn't mean he didn't like the records he did with Stan Lynch. I mean, I love those records. They're very cool. But that happens every once in a while. So, you know, if you read the 4 agreements, don't take it personally, man.
No, and also what I'm saying is,
gigs.
in some ways, even though, you know, feelings are involved, at the same time, he is taking cats and helping them become. He's keeping the cycle of music alive, which actually is.
Yeah,
that's it. I mean, that's all. You bring people in, you say, okay, I'm going to cut you loose now. You don't need the train. I mean, you're already a badass player, but you've been wanting to get a lot of stuff out of your system. Go be yourself. Go do your thing.
Yeah, man. And also with that, people say, you know, like I did fortunate, and I look at the gigs I might do and feel fortunate. I don't dwell on the gigs that I'm not asked to do. That's
I mean, that's
else.
beautiful.
I'm thankful when I think of Phil and Jill. I just think when I see them, I think of good times. I think of gigs that we've done together, and that there's no animosity towards anybody. You know, I look at it with Bruce Hornsby. Bruce and I worked together 20 years, from 78 to 98. So that's 210 dog years, am I right? Something like that.
The Collier dog.
Now,
Yeah, no, I did,
time,
man.
It's been 20 years. I've known Bruce, 40 plus years. We're friends. We're tight. People go, are you going to sit in with Bruce when he comes? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm going to hear him as a fan and as a brother. I have no expectations. And I look back at the great body of work that Bruce Hornsby and the Range did, and then just the Bruce Hornsby solo stuff. 6 albums. I'm good with that, man. Over 20 years?
Well, I mean, that essentially, that's when we started our conversation, that when I started to do a deep dive on Molo, that's where your discography starts. But little do we know that there's a lot more in the box there than meets the eye. But it's true. Have you ever played in a context with no bass player?
I've played with bass players. Some are better than others.
No. I'm just talking about like a situation where, because there was a time when, and this is even predating the Virginia Beach Molo, the marinating with the nuns and everything. But I mean, you'd have trios with, and this might have happened in Miami, but you know, sax, drums or guitar, drums, and organ with the dude kicking pedals. And
sure,
so
man.
there was have you ever been in it? What is it like to play without a traditional bass player, if you've ever had that experience?
Yeah, I had that experience. We were playing jazz in D.C., and I was playing with this really cool jazz piano player.
This is what I want to hear about.
Yeah, and there's another one I'm going to give you in a second.
All right.
Named Wade Beach. And Wade is just a phenomenal player. He can sort of channel Chick Corea, Herbie.
I got to get hip to this cat.
McCoy, some Oscar, some Bud Powell. He's just a great piano player. And I would do gigs with him, and it would just be Wade on piano and me on drums. And I learned from duets how to play jazz. To the point where I went to the University of Miami and auditioned for the piano teacher. He was like, wow, man, you can play. And I was like, well, it's because I played probably, 100 gigs with this guy, Wade Beach. And we'd have a singer occasionally, but the focus was just the duet of me and Wade. And I learned to play brushes and learned to play swing, and he was a great piano player. So that's the one context. Also, when you looked me up, did a band called Liquid Jesus show up?
No, man. It's sparse out there, man. Liquid Jesus.
Yeah, man. Well, that's how I met Mike Watt. I was in a band called, and actually they had another drummer, but something happened to him, in Hollywood. And
it always
I got
does,
called
yeah.
to the gig. Yeah, man. So I ended up playing with these young guys, and it was Scott Tracy and Johnny Lonely. But Scott Tracy, rest his soul, he was Vic Ventura when I first met him.
Right.
And Johnny Lonely was, I don't know what his name was, but Johnny Lonely and Todd. And we had a singer named Buck Murphy, and they were okay. A lot of style, not a lot of substance, But
right.
I played that, and that was out of, like, those bands like Mary's Danish and Pygmy Love Circus. Tool had just swerved into that scene, and then they got huge. Fishbone, James, all those L.A. kind of hard pop bands. I was in Liquid Jesus, so you can find that on somewhere. Not great, but good. And it's me playing rock. I mean, I was just playing hardcore, as rock as I can get. So interesting talking to you. I guess I've done a lot of different stuff.
Well, I mean, this is one of those games that, I mean, the pitcher can't find the strike zone. We're only in the top of the fifth right now. So we've been cooking here for 80 minutes. But before I let you go, May is kind of a wash for me, but I was hoping you could hit me to some of you said you got a lot of cool gigs coming up. Is there anything in June? Because I really would love to come and hang.
Yeah, man. I'll read it down to you real quick what I've got.
Yeah.
I've got.
Well, you know what? Hold on. Let's wrap the interview, and I'll call you on my phone because I got one more question for you. So.
Okay.
Anyway, Molo, part 2 in the books. I had a ball, and we'll do it again.
Yeah, man, and we'll talk. And like I said, I've got some cool cap dates coming up with Phil and some stuff on the outlook. Thanks. I'll talk to you in a bit.
Cheers, buddy.
Take care.
Yep. The loquacious and talented John Molo, part 2 in the books. Just learning more about him every day. Wow, Watson. That was a mind blower. That's it for now. I'm off to New Orleans. It's Jake Feinberg Show. Peace.
When you see a detour sign, it's warning you of danger.